Blog Talk Radio.
Again, we have a very interesting guest. Our guest today is Ουίλιαμ Ουάγκνερ. Now, Ουίλιαμ Ουάγκνερ, he's got his own television show, which is called On Second Thought, and it's a political show uncovering all kinds of conspiracy and corruption in government.
It's very obvious to me, even sitting in the public section, it was very obvious after the first two witnesses that Michael was obviously the victim here, and it became apparent. But I still thought he might have given them some alcohol, so I paid very close attention when they discussed the jet plane ride and drinking whatever they were drinking out of a Coca-Cola can. I paid very close attention, and day by day I took meticulous notes because we weren't allowed to bring our own cameras. We had a pool camera. Now, as to the Jackson trial, very quickly with the second witness and the next witness, it was obvious that these people were lying for a reason. They saw money at the end of these long lies. The prosecutor would start out, and he would question one of his witnesses, and that would take up usually till the lunch break. Then the defending attorneys would cross-examine them in the afternoon. But the national media processed on the East Coast is 3 hours ahead of us. So they almost never got a report about the defense side. So you just hear day after day of Michael's accused of this, and this guy said this, and this guy said that. And you'd hear, as Tom Mesereau said to me the other day, the most salacious, ridiculous accusations. And then when the defense got up to bat and would prove them to be liars, the evening news was already over with. And so you didn't get to hear any of that. That didn't get on national news. Very rarely did you hear any of it. A couple of things stick in my mind. One was the falsification of the fingerprints evidence. It was carefully contrived by Snedden. Just like he set Slick Gardner up and it brought all his news media in, they had this thing set up. Well, the boy had testified that Michael got him aroused by giving him this barely legal magazine. Here's the problem with that testimony, and he repeated and was asked at least a half a dozen times by defense after the prosecutor had asked the question. The defense asked him different ways over and over the same thing. What date did he give you this magazine? Where did he give you the magazine? Why didn't your brother notice this? Well, brother had gone off to get a snack at the kitchen or whatever. Well, here's the problem. If Michael gave him this magazine and the boy testified he'd last been at Neverland, the very last time he'd been at Neverland was January, February, or March of 2003. And he'd never returned since. If he got his fingerprints on that barely legal magazine, that would have been miraculous because the magazine hadn't been published till October of 2003. So there is no way a magazine published in October could have been published in January, February, or March, and the boy got his fingerprints on it. So we know the boy was lying. Right there, we know he was lying. And that came out at the end of a long series over several days of questioning. That came out when Tom Mesereau put the cover of that magazine up in front of the whole court. Everybody could see it on a screen that was like 8 feet by 6 feet behind the witness. And he asked Gavin Avizo to look at the magazine and for a third or fourth or fifth or sixth time asked him, is that the magazine Michael gave you? And the boy said yes. And then Tom Mesereau said, with pointing to the date, he said, would you look at the date in the corner of the magazine and read that date to the court? And the boy read the date and it said October 2003. And then he asked him, now when did you say you were last at Neverland? And the boy stuck to his story. The boy had been coached not to change his story no matter what. So he stuck to it. And the jury rolled their eyes. And I was sitting there at that point with my media credentials. I got my media credentials by then. I'm sitting in like the seat right behind Catherine, Michael's mother, but across the aisle. And I could see the jury's faces, and they were rolling their eyes like, oh, my God, another horrible lie. So right then the jury, I could see it in their faces. This boy's lying. Gavin Arvizo's lying against Michael Jackson. Now, the prosecutors didn't look at these jury's faces, and most of the media didn't. They were pretty much fixed at the image up on the wall and Gavin on the stand, but I was looking at everybody. And I knew right then and there they couldn't convict him of that one charge. It couldn't. But then there was more evidence, and Tom Mesereau brought up, I don't remember now if it was before or after this. No, it must have been before, because this was the final. Then they moved on to other evidence. Before this, he had brought up the grand jury report from 2004. Because remember, the report on the evidence earlier had been that Michael's print was on one page and Gavin's print was on another page of that barely legal magazine. So there's a question. How did the boy get his fingerprints on it? Good question. The answer is, at the grand jury in 2004, after they'd made, I think, 80 raids to Neverland, it wasn't just one raid. They went back like 80 times and kept looking and ciphering through things and
this was never told.
I don't think it was ever told on national TV. The local station mentioned that they'd gone back a third or fourth time, but it was much, much more than that. They went back like 80 times. The sheriff's deputies went through that gate. It got to the gate guard, would see him coming and open the gate and just let him roll on through. He didn't stop to ask him. He knew what was going on. I think maybe they'd call in advance and say, we're coming again. We're at your gate right now, and they'd just have the gate open. They'd roll in. And they'd go scrounging for anything because they hadn't found anything in the first 80 raids that they could really nail Michael for. And they drilled open his safe. They went into all the secret passages. They went through his children's drawers. I mean, his children's underwear drawers. They went through everything. They turned things upside down. They just rampaged, and you can understand why Michael felt so violated. I mean, to have the police go through your house once or twice would make you feel violated, but 80 times, maybe 90 times, I forget. Well, the bottom line is that the grand jury in 2004, this experienced, reelected prosecutor, he handed the boy the magazine without putting gloves on the boy. No experienced prosecutor would do that anywhere in the country. You might have a new prosecutor, if he just graduated from law school on Monday and was sworn as a DA on Thursday, he might make a stupid mistake like that, but not somebody of 25 years of being elected and reelected and reelected. No. This had to be premeditated with malice aforethought to tamper with that evidence, to create false evidence, because I can't view it any other way, not from an experienced prosecutor. So Sneddon knew in advance he was going to manufacture this false evidence. He gave the boy the magazine in 2004 at the grand jury, and we know that for a fact because there's a court reporter taking down every single word uttered at that grand jury, which is mandatory under the law. So one of the grand jurors spoke up and said, shouldn't that boy be wearing gloves? Oops. The one grand juror, I don't know what was wrong with the others, but only one spoke up, and it was enough because the court reporter correctly recorded that statement, and when Michael Jackson's defense team poured through the grand jury and they found that, then they got the magazine, they looked at the date, they knew this evidence had been manufactured falsely, with premeditation, with malice aforethought. And those words I use very carefully but very deliberately, because Michael is dead now, and I hold, it is my view, that the murder of Michael Jackson actually started with the manufacturing of this false evidence in 2004 and carried on right through 2005. Now, that was just one item where they manufactured false evidence. And it's clear, and it's on the court record to this day, and someone should have indicted Tom Sneddon. And why it hasn't happened is because the media has so carefully whitewashed this and then Tom Sneddon quietly retired in his disgrace and took his huge pension, and I think he should be collecting that pension